Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit more about the jungle item changes that Riot have planned, why I think that they are not a very good idea, and what I think Riot can be doing instead to fix the problem that these new jungle items are designed to solve. Now, for those of you who haven't seen, the new jungle items are basically buying an egg for a pet that will then follow you throughout the jungle. As you farm camps, you will be able to eventually give your jungling pets treats from these camps that you're farming. And upon reaching certain breakpoints of treats, your pet will grow stronger and upgrade your smite. Eventually, your pet will become strong enough to help you in combat as well, and after farming even more camps, your smite will upgrade again and you'll gain access to a unique bonus. Now, this in general seems fine, right? It's sort of the similar process to the jungle items that we have right now, where you smite enough times, you get an upgrade, and it seems totally fine. And admittedly, these jungle items are designed in such a way as to make there a higher opportunity cost for junglers to be constantly ganking. Right now, the issue with junglers constantly ganking and basically dictating the pace of the entire game, irrespective of what the lanes are looking like, is because they're able to spend a lot of their time setting up for and waiting for gank opportunities to happen, because the punish for them doing that isn't very much. Right now, there is a fairly decent window where you can theoretically clear all of your camps and nothing has respawned, at which point the best play is simply to wait for ganks. But even in circumstances where the camps are respawning, you aren't punished that much for whiffing a gank. If I sit in a bush top lane for an entire minute and a half, I'm really just missing out on some golden experience, and in certain situations, that's not even that much of a punish versus my jungling opponent, right? If it's a particularly slow clearer like a Mumu, I'm not actually that worried because I can clear the jungle significantly faster than he can, and therefore I'm not actually giving up on that much by waiting this long for a gank to happen. Even if the gank doesn't actually pay out, it kind of doesn't matter. I'm not punished altogether that hard. These new jungle items are designed in such a way as to make they're more of a punish. After all, your smite upgrades are now tied to how many camps you've cleared. So if you wait for a minute and a half at a top lane bush and don't get the gank off and don't get a kill, not only are you sacrificing golden experience from the failed gank and you could have been farming during that time, but you're also setting yourself back by not clearing camps to upgrade your smite. Theoretically, because you waited so long top lane, you now can't clear fast enough to get your jungling smite upgrade at the same time as your lane opponent, and therefore when it comes to a Drake fight, he has a better smite than you do, right? That's sort of the idea from what it seems to be to me. Obviously, I'm not a Riot dev, so I don't necessarily know if that's the case or not, but it seems pretty reliable that that's what Riot are attempting to do with these changes. That said, I really don't like these changes, and there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, the changes are stack-focused and farming-focused. They say you need to be clearing camps, and camps specifically, so obviously this doesn't work if you're clearing lane minions, if you stop to cover a lane, for example, and the amount of camps that you need to be clearing will generally get you to your maximum upgrade by about 20 minutes. This means that for the vast majority of the early stages of the game, you are going to be doing nothing but clearing camps. Anytime you take time out of your day to go gank for somebody, you are wasting time that you could have been using to clear. And this is problematic, and the reason we know this is problematic is because of Feral Flare, which was an item, if you guys don't remember, released way back in the day as an upgrade for Wriggle's Lantern. The idea was that you bought a Wriggle's Lantern would stack as you killed jungle camps, very similarly to the new jungling items, and after you killed sufficient camps, Wriggle's Lantern would transform into Feral Flare, giving you on-hit magic damage based on the number of stacks it held, and would continue to stack as the game went on. This had very degenerate gameplay, not least of which because it was very heavily incentivizing junglers farm to the exclusion of all else. I can't count the number of times that a Master Yi on my team was still farming camps while we're losing inhibitors because he had to get his Feral Flare, and sometimes he would end the game without actually ever getting to the Feral Flare because he couldn't clear enough camps. But suffice it to say, junglers would then be ignoring their lanes no matter how good of the gank opportunity might be because, no, I'm farming my Feral Flare, it's all going to be power for me, I don't care about you guys, I'm just going for this. Part of the other issue, of course, is that this was a very uninteractive playstyle. Theoretically, if the Master Yi was able to get to his Feral Flare, he could come out of the jungle at 20 minutes with a transformed Feral Flare and all of the items that he bought with the gold from clearing that many camps, and would just be the strongest champion in the game, bar none. And he never once had to interact with a champion to get to that state because everything he was doing was safely farming his camps in the jungle. He wasn't laning against somebody Obviously, invasions are a little bit harder for players at lower tiers of play to pull off, or things like counter jungling to steal away camps doesn't really happen. So Master Yi would come out of the jungle at 20 minutes and just be the strongest champion in the game, despite not having to have actually fought anybody. Again, a very degenerate interaction that wasn't a lot of fun. And things only got worse when you consider the fact that you could have two champions in the game building this item. If both junglers, for example, you had an Udyr against a Master Yi, were both building a Riggle's Lantern. Then you ended up in a scenario where neither one of them could stop farming ever, because the second one of them did, the other would be able to pull ahead in terms of how much damage their Feral Flare was giving them, and therefore both junglers would have to perma-clear their jungle 100% of the time for the entire game, and it just was not a very fun time to be playing League of Legends or be playing in the jungle. Riot made an attempt to fix this with Devour, which replaced Riggle's Lantern and Feral Flare. The idea was that Devour would only stack up until the maximum stacks, and it transformed to Sated Devour, and at that point it could no longer stack further. It would just give you the on-hit magic damage at a certain value and say this is all you get. But in practice, this didn't actually solve the problem of junglers disappearing into their jungle for 20 minutes, ignoring their team, and then either becoming the strongest champion in the game bar none, despite the fact that they never PvP interacted with anybody, or the game would end and they would still be attempting to stack their item. Either way, just not a lot of fun to deal with. And Riot, in their own words, said, we cannot make this balanced. We can't find a way to make jungling, farming items work, and so we are removing Devour from the game, and we don't intend to do this again. Here we are, though, a few years later, and jungle farming items are back in the game with all of these same disadvantages. They are still requiring you to spend an inordinate amount of time farming the jungle. That still means that there is a disadvantage for not power farming the jungle. It very heavily incentivizes ignoring your team in favor of your own personal power, and it still means that you can come out of the jungle at 20 minutes with an exceptionally powerful passive. I think the other two of them I'm not that worried about. The Cloud Leaper and the Turtle I'm not that worried about, though the Turtle has some other problems that I'll talk about in a moment. But the Noxian Embercat I think is really scary because it permanently gives you red buff. You just get a red buff forever. Your auto attacks constantly slow and deal bonus damage. And this is a problem. I can think of any number of champions for whom that gives them an unreasonable amount of stickiness, especially in gank scenarios. One can imagine the difficulty of escaping from a Kindred who's able to show up in your lane with a red buff, with Creeping Dread in order to gank for you, but at least they're not going to have a red buff forever. Except then they had a Noxian Embercat and they permanently have a red buff. The Green Smite doesn't necessarily have that issue, but the shield that you gain off this Green Smite scales with the number of jungle camps you've cleared and will keep scaling even after you fully transform the item. Does this sound familiar? It should, because it's Feral Flare. And admittedly, this is a little bit better than Feral Flare because it's not offensive in nature. That means it's going to be built on tank champions, most of whom will have a very strong pull towards participating with their team because they're not ever going to have the power of being able to just farm all game and be the strongest champion in the game. They might have a very big shield, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to carry with it, right? So it's a little bit better, but I still dislike the fact that this gameplay is saying ignore your team, constantly farm. There's never an opportunity where you shouldn't be clearing your camps because it's only giving you power forever. And this, I think, is just ultimately why I really dislike the jungle items. Another reason why I dislike the new jungle items is because it's doing away with the old system, which I think is just so elegant. I really like the new system because of how little it actually makes you think about the jungling items, which I think is the least interactive or engaging part that I've ever seen in the jungle. I can imagine, or I remember struggling through the days of Skirmisher's Saber versus Stalker's Blade versus Ranger's Trailblazer, deciding which jungle item I actually wanted to buy, deciding what enchantment I wanted to buy, even before then, having to build one of the three jungle items, the Spirit of the Spectral Wraith or the Spirit of the Elder Lizard, right? All those jungling items that existed back in the day, having to build this random jungle item that I have to clear the jungle before I can actually go into an item I want to buy, something like a Black Cleaver or like a Tiamat or any of those other items. It was not a lot of fun to have to deal with that, and the new jungling items did away with that permanently. Not only was there not that much choice, pick one or two, damage or utility, and then just smite with it a bunch, and eventually it will go away and upgrade your smite. And there's still enough gameplay here, right? You can just ruthlessly smite your way through the jungle, never holding smite for an objective, but potentially being able to transform it very quickly, or you can be holding it to help you secure objectives on the off chance of not necessarily transforming it as fast as you maybe wanted to, right? There were advantages and disadvantages to the jungling system, but I really liked the thought process that it gave and the fact that it would eventually go away and you never had to think about it ever again. The new jungling items have a lot more decisions to be made, and they have a lot more emphasis behind farming and a lot more thought process that you have to put into the jungle item that you've picked, as opposed to the old system where you didn't have to put in that energy, right? You could just kind of decide what you wanted to do at the beginning of the game and ignore it from there. The newer jungle items as well still have the feels bad moments of being outsmote by an enemy jungler. The damage percentages that it jumps up by each time it upgrades is actually quite substantial. Right now in PvE it's a 450 smite base. It upgrades itself all the way to a 600 damage smite at the first breakpoint, and then it upgrades itself again all the way to a 1200 damage smite at the final breakpoint. Something like that, but I know it's a 1200 damage smite at the very end. And again, this I think is a bit of a disadvantage because it means that there can be a moment where I happen to go bot lane and maybe we happen to just barely miss a kill or something and I died and I wasn't able to hit the break point, but my opponent did, and now we're able to go to the Drake, but my opponent automatically outsmites me. What am I supposed to do? Go clear a camp real quick before coming to the Drake? What if I have to clear multiple camps? Are we able to stall that long? It's just not a really feels good moment, especially when you consider that in the older League of Legends, smite scaled with champion level, meaning if I was a jungler that was behind, my team could say, go top lane and just soak that wave, because you need the experience to catch up to your opponent. We can't do that nowadays because it's all jungle camp based, which is not great. You do gain a couple of stacks over time, but it's not very many stacks overall. And I think that if Riot really want to incentivize junglers to farm on occasion and maybe not just permagank, there are ways of doing this. There is a way that I think can help triage the problem that Riot are trying to solve, which is bring back smite damage increasing based on level rather than based on your jungle item. And I wouldn't do it the same granular way that the original smite did. Before, it was like smite damage increased by like 50 or 60 or so every time your champion leveled up, which led to just some weird situations where you had to be like, I'm level 11, he's level 13, his smite does this much, my smite does that much. Don't do it like that. Find level breakpoints, right? If you really want to break it down, maybe with ultimate levels, right? At level 6, 11, and 16, your smite upgrades to do more damage. That's totally fine. That still captures the ability for an enemy jungler to outfarm you, for example, right? To be able to get more CS than you, clear more camps, and get to a higher level. Therefore, their smite is better, right? Once they hit that breakpoint. But it still allows the player who's behind to not be punished as much, and it also means that you don't have to worry about then introducing these horrendous stacking jungle items that are just going to feel exactly the same way as Pharaoh Flare and Devour did back in the day. But those are my thoughts, you guys. You should let me know what you're thinking of the new jungling items down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you're a big fan of the new system. I really want to hear from you, and you can tell me maybe why the new system is so much better than the old one. But again, let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.